Okay, we heard that now everyone is an expert on AI thanks to our friend Gary. And so we're going to have to think about what to talk about here. We have some very exciting companies, some of which I know well, some I'm getting to know, with us here today. So maybe what we'll do is we'll start with, as Rajna's getting set up, maybe Gaurav with you, 2 minutes, a little bit of your introduction, and then what you're doing at Balbix.
All right. So my name is Gaurav Banga. I'm the founder and CEO of a cybersecurity startup called Balbix. And as much more as it's cybersecurity, it is the journey has been about, hey, cybersecurity is so complex. There's so much data involved. There are so many different ways in which bad things can happen. And it got to a point where we imagined that the only way to solve this thing is going to be by leveraging a lot of AI and a lot of automation. So what my company does is we use Gen AI and other advanced AI techniques which don't have such sexy names like Gen AI. We use all of those and we process large amounts of data that every enterprise generates, large amounts of data from outside. And we try to give our customers, who tend to be large enterprises, a better way to manage their cybersecurity risk down to acceptable levels.
Great, thanks. Abhi, maybe you can take the next one. Tell people what you're up to. Also a little bit on your background so that people have a little context of where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah, no, great to be here. Hi everyone, my name is Abhay Parsnis. I've been in software space for the last 3 decades or so. Currently, founder and CEO of a company called Typeface. We focus a lot on helping the biggest brands run their marketing campaigns much more effectively. So create extremely high volumes of personalized content to drive all their customer engagement. Started the company roughly 2.5 years ago, and before that, in terms of background, have been in software most of my career. Was a chief technology officer at Adobe for almost a decade, and then was at Microsoft for a decade before that, running some of their core cloud business like Azure.
And now he's trying to unlearn all those bad habits from those 2 companies in a startup.
You need to make mistakes to learn how to actually avoid them.
Parvinder, how about you?
I'm Parvinder Johar, CEO for Avathon, and I think like you, it's been more than 3 decades in software. I think it's the 5th software company as a startup kind of in there. 2 of them were in my early days back in 90s or so, and the other 3 kind of after 2014.
That was before Pankaj was born, you know that.
Yeah. Pankaj. In there too. Pankaj, it's up to you now.
Well, tell people what Avathon's doing. What are you doing now?
So Avathon is, I think, compared to all other companies in the valley, we are probably a blue-collar AI company because we sit at the intersection of infrastructure and AI. So think of infrastructure means power, energy, aviation, aerospace, defense, and applying kind of AI and automation to those core industries is what we do as a company.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Sumant. Pankaj Patel, I am co-founder and CEO of Nile. And our vision is to remove the human dependence from management of the network. Networks are pretty complex, very expensive, and it represents a giant TAM. So we are taking a clean sheet approach to do to networking what the cloud providers did to compute and storage. So that's a mission that we are on. We have been in business now for almost 6 years. Prior to starting Nile, I was Chief Development Officer at Cisco. I was there for 22 years. And so this is my way to cleanse my soul of the sins I committed in the past. So do something right.
You did for a little while, and we have your co-worker, Mr. Chambers, joining us later in the afternoon and be the most valuable company in the world.
Exactly.
How was that experience?
I'm sure.
Did you cash out? Did you do that?
Yeah. He will answer that.
Sarvajan, up to you now.
So it's a delight to be here. Thank you all. I am a scientist by profession who fights clinical problems as a profession. Diseases. I've spent almost 32 years working on medicines that help people breathe better. Patients who have acute shortage of breath, asthma, or chronic shortage of breath, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. In those two fields, my inventions and products have reached worldwide almost 200 to 250 million patients, generating over $100 billion in revenues for the various companies that I've worked on. My last body of work in that field was with a company called Pearl Therapeutics that I co-founded with a colleague of mine. And at that we raised $167 million from VCs, turned it into $1 billion exit for the VCs. And now AstraZeneca acquired that, and this year AstraZeneca is selling 3 products from Pearl's pipeline, making $1 billion this year, reaching patients worldwide. What we did there was to deliver medicines and their combinations as aerosols to the lungs, just as smoke delivers damage to the lungs. Except smoke gets exhaled, these medicinal aerosols should not be exhaled. That's the problem we solved at my last company, and now it's a part of AstraZeneca portfolio. Over the last 10 years, I've been building a company called MinIO Safe, which is for safe revascularization, which is blood flow restoration in totally blocked arteries in human heart and legs. And this company is ready to launch its first product in the coming few months to open up blockages above the knee, and we've got a pipeline of devices that will go below the knee and in the coronary. And this is the first invention that combines 3 different mechanisms of tackling total blockages. One that finds a path, another that compresses the blockage against the vessel wall, and third that leaves a channel behind. All 3 of the mechanisms are built into one invention from MinIO Safe that's going to restore the blood flow through total blockages in a rapid, safe manner in the hands of all interventionists worldwide. So that's what I do today.
I mean, it's super impressive, and obviously what we do as investors look at how this world and the world of our world of compute and AI are coming together, and we'll definitely get your views on that. I thought maybe we can start the conversation with Abhay, you and Gaurav. Let's talk a little bit about how do you sell an AI product?
Well, as we were just talking backstage, right now with the level of noise and hype and excitement, selling is not the problem. It's actually delivering value that's the problem for a lot of people. There is a lot of excitement, but jokes aside, there are a couple of things going on. First, there is a significant technology shift happening at all layers of the stack at the same time. And so for a lot of, at least for us, we sell to some of the biggest enterprise clients, so we don't focus on consumer at all. For us, some of the biggest companies like Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble, or financial services companies like Fidelity, MetLife. So first of all, there's the technology aspect which is changing a lot. And there's a big part of this is right now education. They're trying to actually understand how to make sense. Every day you wake up and there's new paper, new breakthrough, new ChatGPT release, new this and that. And how do you cut through the noise? So a big part of, I would say right now, selling is not even selling your software, is actually helping them get educated and understand how to make sense of this maze. They're all excited, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what the playbook is.
And have you seen generally people moving from POCs to actual production yet? Have you started to see that evolution?
Absolutely. And I would say that's probably the other place where maybe there is a bifurcation of kind of companies and use cases. Depends a lot on, there's a lot of experimentation, POCs, innovation budgets that don't go anywhere. People just try
one-time things.
Yeah, they try something for 3 months, 6 months because the board asked them to do something and they tried. But if you approach this on the other end, which is certainly where we are focusing a lot of energy, is what is a real ROI of what's the real shift in your business process, in your actually way you conduct business. In our case, a lot of it is, just to give you a sense, there is around $100 billion a year that gets spent on marketing. That is just repeated manual labor that there is no leverage on. And so if you really zero in on to a company, they actually don't care whether it's AI, ChatGPT, this model, that model. is, are you going to drive some top line either growth for me? Are you going to drive some savings for me? And ideally both. And so if you can really connect to that, so that part is starting to work quite well. I mean, we have quite a few customers.
I will say that one challenge there is whose problem is that? Because the actual practitioner doesn't like that being solved.
I was going to say, so the issue is not so much is it shifting to production. The issue honestly is not even technology, the issue is change management, where the C-level, CEO, board, everyone is excited about AI. They sign the purchase order, they get a deal done, they say now go throughout my company. When you go to the people actually doing the day jobs today, one, there is a new learning curve. They have to learn these new tools, which itself is always a case with any new technology. But this one is different because some of them are not only being asked to learn a technology, they have a genuine fear that this thing is going to replace them.
Any new technology that happens, how do you see that?
So I think our thoughts are very similar. What we have found is that all the AI that's behind the scenes is very, very hard to sell because people really can't tell the difference between, good computers, analytics and data science and machine learning and all that, and when does it become AI? So we don't even try that. And what we find is that when people say AI, they're really saying is, does it mimic something like a colleague? Like, can it do stuff that a colleague would do for me, like my assistant? So what we have found the biggest success is if you can put people early on in the selling process or even in the marketing process through an experience where they experience the value of the product, just like how they would experience the value of a very smart coworker, a very smart, diligent, extra pair of hands, an extra pair of eyes that cost almost nothing, and never needs to take vacation, understands you instantaneously, does not ask you for days to get back to you, but instead responds in tens of seconds, perhaps even a minute. That's once they experience that, you don't even have to name it. They experience AI. And I think that's, if you kind of look around the success of some of the companies that have actually been able to monetize AI, I feel that that's exactly what they've been able to successfully do.
And that is the early stages of tech adoption, right? And it is going to move more and more into the bowels of how things are run. Parvinder, you are Mr. Blue Collar here. You can explain to us how do you go out and I know a little bit about his company because I'm on the board. How do you sell? That's actually good. I should ask you that on the board. How do you sell value?
I think part one is, as you said, kind of understanding the value proposition and what the business is trying to accomplish. Right? And when it comes to selling, actually, you don't sell to a company, you sell to a person at the end of the day. And it's kind of, I think you were asking the same question, that whose problem is it and what are you trying to go solve on that side. In some cases, the CEO, some cases not. But I will give you kind of a couple of examples to talk through it. Right? So if you think of on automotive, kind of we have two challenges going on at the C level. One is China is so far ahead of the US companies and the European companies that there's just a notion of that your bill of material, your supply chain costs, your manufacturing costs are inferior. And there's this fear kind of on that side. So you're working in this case more with the fear that what do you go do to be more competitive with Chinese EV makers, frankly, on that side. But the real application of AI starts getting into that kind of what are the core issues driving your cost. And quality is probably the biggest driver of cost in kind of something like auto or aerospace or any of those things to begin with. But it doesn't show up till warranty or recalls. Right? So who do you sell to? Kind of if you're selling to a warranty or recall person, they are really kind of towards the end of the chain. Right? You're trying to sell back to that people who are doing manufacturing and people who are really doing sourcing and figure out that how are you going to use, in this case, computer vision and other AI applications to improve quality. So Sumant, in that case, kind of you have to really go and find out who the buyer is going to be, because the people having the problem probably can't really do much to go fix it.
So one, I would say, takeaway from the comments is it's quite complicated. And you have to really figure out how to simplify it to see that repeatable motion. And I think we're in that stages of figuring that out. Not just the companies here on the stage, I think in the industry, one would say, was trying to figure it out. Pankaj, who are you selling to?
We sell it to typically IT and the finance people. And for us, the value actually translates into a much better customer and IT experience, number one. And more importantly, actually, nowadays, it's about the security portions, right? Because of what we have done, how we are able to, because, taking a lot of, for example, manual surface area out of the equation, because that's where over 60 to 70% of the cyber attacks originate from.
Human error.
Human errors. Yeah. And what we are able to prevent that by doing that, it translates into real value. And then the last but not the least, when we automate pretty much everything and we use a pretty heavy power of AI, ML and data and analytics, we are able to provide something where the IT tickets get pretty much all eliminated. So now you are recognizing that in the real savings, because now you see that real total cost of ownership savings, and they can operate at a much lower budget.
But just knowing what you're going through, this is still a complicated sale.
It is.
Because you have to show total cost of ownership in a way that people haven't thought of it before. And the one takeaway from all four comments that I think the audience should appreciate is that AI is replacing human cost. Whether it's in security monitors, or whether it's in content creators, or whether it's in warranty or safety and security people, you're replacing not existing software time, you're replacing a human cost in human process. And how do you calculate that has been a big challenge. So right now back to you. Now the area you are in, which is a super interesting area and obviously very valuable to the world if the things work. How have you seen these technology developments change what you do? And how do you see that develop over the next 10 years? And particularly around AI, Gen AI and all of that.
Indeed. So we are recipients of the intelligent work AI does in clinical arena. We leverage those. For example, if you take a look at chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, the pulmonary ailments, or even look at COVID in the recent years, there is a company that's going to be talking this afternoon in the MedTech forum, in the last forum, called FluidDA. They have taken software algorithms, they've taken CAT scanning, CT scanning, they've taken big data models and figured out for a given patient, how does a given medicine change their anatomy? In the COVID, how does the COVID actually change the blood vessel architecture in the lungs that changes the oxygenation level in the bloodstream, which is a very unique phenomenon that's been happening during the COVID time frame. This company figured it out in real time. So in my last company, we actually used their intelligence built into their software in demonstrating that we are indeed reaching deep lungs without exhaling our aerosols and creating effects in the deeper, tiny little airways that previous aerosols were unable to. Now, the COPD patients as a result got the other AI, which is actual improvement. They could walk. Patients could walk up the stairs with their grocery bags. Patients could mow their lawn. These kind of real improvements we were able to demonstrate once we really figured out how to model the drug delivery. Now, in the other field that I'm working on, in the field of vascular medicine, opening up totally blocked arteries, there are 2 or 3 companies that are doing some fantastic job, taking software algorithms to interpret a given patient's blood flow, blood architecture. A company called HeartFlow, another company that is Elucid. And there are a few other companies. AliveCore, that's another company that's being figured in the MedTech forum this afternoon. To give people at home ECG, to give physicians an understanding of the blood flow architecture, And what we do in our mechanical engineering and material science world is take that knowledge and design features in our devices such that we can stay within the blood vessel and restore the blood flow without having adverse events of 3 major families of devices, replacing all of them.
So look, the world of biology, healthcare is one of the places we think these technologies will have massive impact in many ways and many big problems to be solved. But let's talk about innovation, and maybe back to you, Garima. As you thought about building Balbix, there was the innovation pre-OpenAI and then innovation post-OpenAI. And there's this dialogue that happens in companies, especially in the enterprise space. When were you founded? Creates a lot of positives and negative connotations. Talk us a little bit through that journey and where do you think we're headed?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question for me. See, back in 2015, 2016, in the early days of the company, we just had this idea that you should be able to ask some really hard questions, which today you do not have a way to answer. And we kind of distilled the problem down to 2 things. Number one was you need different ways of computing. And this kind of like what we talked about earlier, which is the use of AI for computation, right? Which is some problems are just very, very hard, and previously have tried to solve them using data science, machine learning, and it doesn't quite work. It didn't quite work in cybersecurity just because of the different types of data. And there we start running into some of the limits of the existing algorithms. And as the AI technologies evolved, and I can give you CNNs and RNNs, deep learning, and then finally sequence-to-sequence deep learning, tensor-to-tensor deep learning, transformer models, and then what we have right now, which is a special kind of transformer models, generative pre-trained transformers, which is what LLMs are all about. So we went through that journey and we figured out better and faster ways to do computation. Right? And that was what it was. And our ability to communicate was not changed. Right? Natural language algorithms were just still natural language algorithms. And they were kind of, all of us have experienced them and we've cursed them. You can't even understand this. What happened when ChatGPT and LLMs became real and became accurate is that whole world changed completely. For the first time, a computer could hold an intelligent conversation, right? Initially for a small task, and then more recently for increasingly complex tasks. And once you start mastering some of the guardrails around that prevent hallucination, and which requires a lot of effort, sometimes it's a domain-specific effort, you have to teach the computer how to say one very simple thing that we all know, but it's exceptionally hard for LLMs to do that, is I don't know.
And do you think the customers you're selling to are sophisticated enough to understand all of that?
Absolutely. That has been the biggest surprise for me. Like figuring out that quite literally every man, woman, and child on the planet, not all of them, but a significant percentage of them use LLMs in their private lives for interesting things. And so it's almost like, they use ChatGPT or something like that.
Or even search into something.
They use them. And therefore, when we start saying, hey, you can apply a specialized version of ChatGPT for cybersecurity, it's an easy sell. It's an easier sell. Nothing.
Yeah, so maybe Abhishek, just thinking about what you're building, and we had a little conversation around LLM open source versus building application-specific products. How do you think of that in your space, and how do you talk to your customers about that, and how sophisticated is that part of the enterprise about this?
Yeah, first I would say kind of for all of us, obviously different domains, and in kind of events like this, there's a famous, I know everyone knows Moore's law on the semiconductor side. There is a little bit less known law by a Stanford professor called Amara's law, where the more profound the change, we as humans, but especially humans in Silicon Valley, have a tendency to overestimate how quickly it's going to go in the short run. But we tend to underestimate in the long run how profound it's going to be. And so I would say that is very much the case with these AI tools and technologies, where sitting here in this valley with epicenter of all LLMs and AIs and stuff, obviously you can't escape the noise and the feeling that this is going to be deep. But first I would say it's going to be very profound, but it's going to take a long time. I don't think it's going to just overnight, yes, ChatGPT has gone from 0 to whatever, 200, 300 million, and it is amazing to watch everyone experience that. But in the full arc of time, I think the real power of what these tools can do for us, we are barely scratching the surface. So the conversation with customers is as much about not the technology and its rate of evolution, but the rate at which they can absorb change within their businesses. And are they ready for that? How do they drive change within their companies? How do they rescale or upscale, or in some cases eliminate jobs? And then what is the economic dislocation that causes at a company level, at an industry level, at a society level? So those are all really more profound dialogues, but coming maybe a little bit closer to home for us on marketing, I think there are three changes that I think are going to play out. First one is similar to what you were talking about, which is the change where humans go from having to adapt to machines and computers, which is what we have been in for the last 40 years, where we have to program things in specific languages, to machines actually for the first time learning to adapt to us, our culture, our kind of way of interacting. I think everyone kind of gets it, but I think we're underestimating how profound that's going to be a change. And we are right now experiencing it mostly in text-based prompts and typing in search boxes. But when it goes to vision and video and 3D and full immersive and then robotics, I think that world of machines around us in physical spaces that can adapt and learn how we as humans work culturally, I think it's going to completely change our interaction model.
Is that a bright future or dark future? Which one?
You know, it's funny you say that, because a lot of times when I talk to companies, there is the Terminator view of the kind of future, and then we, certainly in what we do, I always say to customers, we have a kind of a Harry Potter view of the future, which is more magical, where these technologies are going to make your life better and delightful. But you got to watch that.
So I once, this is pre-COVID, watched Mark Zuckerberg present his vision for augmented reality. This was a long time before he launched the new glasses, right? This was 5-6 years ago. And he had this vision for just information flying at you from everywhere. It was the most scary thing you can possibly imagine, because we are, I don't think the human mind can process that much that quickly. And so there has to be some constraint and control. Ravinder, your company applies these technologies into spaces that are not necessarily on everyone's top of mind. So, vision was mentioned. Maybe talk a little bit about where that is headed. And then I know you were really keen on, as being someone as an expert in the world of supply chain, and what do these technologies mean to those kinds of spaces?
I think, vision is only one of the senses, right? So as we talk about it, there's a lot of focus on language, the spoken languages also, but there's a language of sound, which is another. In the industrial world, sound matters a lot, right? So even at our house age, if you have an air conditioner or a heater, and when it starts making that sound, you know something is wrong. Right? Think of the same thing on a plane. Think of same thing on the others. So vision.
I don't want to think of the plane. Let's not think of the plane making sounds.
Yeah, I will give you an example. So for us, last 2 years, we have been working with the Air Force Research Lab on doing a co-pilot for how do you go fix an F-16. Right? So if you go through that kind of as a co-pilot on it, and then it's kind of an area where you're replacing humans, but there are not enough mechanics in the world to
But also, maybe for the benefit of the audience, how is it done today?
So today it is trial and error. Right? So because what happens is that any defense forces around the world, we hire kind of between 18 to 22-year-olds, and we tell them to go learn some part of kind of a mechanical side of the world and start fixing it, and then it takes a long time for you to go
with a little list that they check off that they're inspecting.
There's a list that they check off, and it's
so every time you fly, remember that you're at the mercy of an 18 to 22-year-old's quality control.
Yes, but think of that now, applying vision, sound, other sensors, vibrations.
I should mention one of his clients is Boeing. So
yes, and it's a good example to kind of on a Boeing part, because it's not just Boeing. I still don't fly Air India, but you see, Air India also has these same issues, that the planes kind of unpredictably fail, and then we have a landing sometimes in Russia and sometimes in a remote island of Canada, and then you're looking for a mechanic in those places, and our answer is that you have to fly someone there. So, which is what happens for the aviation industry for most part. that you don't really have it. And now you think of kind of this co-pilots, or not that sense, it's a real applications, it's a real world implications for it too. We just announced a relationship where British Aerospace, BAE, is a customer, but if you take that as an example, Sumant, it's the same thing, that they make something called fully automated digital engine control systems. It sits next to an engine of a plane, and a plane cannot fly without it. Now these things sometimes are 30 years old in there, and then planes are kind of usually a 40, 50 year kind of cycle, multiple generations of it. They come in for a repair, and on average it was taking them 44 days because it was again trial and error, and there's a lot of history. And if you think of this language now, you're going back for last 30 years of repairs that have been done, figuring out what was common, what were the symptoms, not in your sense of symptoms in medicine, but just kind of on the repair. And you can't use just one technology. LLMs play a role in the sense of kind of ingesting all the manual data and the videos and others, but so do all these other sensors too. So it's a complex problem to solve to begin with, but once you solve it, and it's a journey kind of in there too, the value out of it is just so high that it's hard to believe that almost everything kind of which is mechanical or electronics in nature won't have a AI co-pilot in the next few years.
Yeah, I will say, I really understood the early over-exaggeration and the late under-exaggeration of these markets, and we are in that phase where we're swinging from one to the other. So Pankaj, we talked a little bit about what you do and you replace humans like most everybody who's building these systems are, but you're also selling to the same humans. So how do you navigate that? And I think someone mentioned, and I want to bring it up, that the key owner of this solution problem is probably the CFO. How do you navigate through that in selling?
So it's a great question. And Abhay and I were talking about this briefly earlier. Change is very hard for humans in general. Any change, especially a change like this, where it might impact the pocketbook, then everything will come out, right? But fortunately, we have gone through some transitions in our lifetime. Not too far back, when AWS actually came out with the cloud service, there were a lot of people who pushed back. And here in Silicon Valley, what the today's server manufacturers basically thought that they could sell more servers and that will be life. And we all know what that turned out to be. And so the data center engineers in IT were pushing back because they really saw this as a major threat. And by the way, if people remember, AWS took a while. It didn't happen overnight. It took many years.
Basically the financial crisis that gave rise to cloud.
And by the way, Netflix was one of the first companies which adopted AWS, and then all the geniuses in Silicon Valley woke up and said, there's something called cloud, which is nice, right? So it is hard. And I think what you have to do is, that lesson actually what taught us is, you show it to, at that time, they showed it to the data center engineers that with this, they can do a better job than they were able to do it before, because they're more armed with a lot of data and analytics. And actually, they can up-level their job to get more into the analytics that they never did before, right? So I think if you are showing people a path that, do you really want to be focused only on the repetitive tasks that you did for 30 years? Or do you rather look at some new data analytics dashboards and provide a real value to either your end customers or otherwise? In order to do that, by the way, what we found is that you need some support at a high level in the company. If you start at the lower level at IT, you know where you will go.
There's no incentive to change.
There's no incentive for them to change, right? So I think you have to sell it to a high level executive, hopefully a CEO or somebody high level, then I think you have to articulate to CFO or somebody in finance to say, what does this mean for your company? And it's just not about the financial value. I mean, in our universe, the industry is old, 40 plus years old now, right? But at the same time, this industry, I mean, all of our lives are completely tethered to internet. We can live without it, right? Every aspect of our life is tethered. So if you are into a situation where if the service is always on, you never have to worry about it, that's a huge value. And so I think you have to go through articulating that differently than what people had done that before. But it is by no means it's easy.
And if so, I go back to the world of healthcare, Subhajana. What is the change required? What do you think will be needed to get these technologies out and benefiting people quicker?
Well, for the technologies to do the job that they are supposed to do, solve a real, compelling clinical challenge first. A lot of times I see entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley with technology idea looking for a clinical challenge, when it really should be the other. Find a clinical problem and work backwards from it. That's step number one. Number two is it's a regulated industry. So we must follow rules. We are supposed to be in marketing and in our sales efforts, following a strict label. So evidence generation of the right kind in either in vitro, laboratory, in vivo, animals and then humans. Correct answers are necessary. And then three is presenting the evidence to all of the constituents of the buying system. The patient, the physician and the payer, all three of them. Considering their needs during the development of the product while working disease backwards is absolutely the trick. Every one of the products that I've worked on has had all those elements satisfied along the way, such that the market became a puller of the product instead of us pushing the product out there. Now, in terms of systemic change, that's a completely big debate. And there are two people that have been put in charge yesterday by President Trump going forward. Let's see how that goes. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, if they change the system.
What a duo.
Not.
What a duo.
Right, we'll see.
So I have a question which is really a little bit more higher level. And if you think about all the work everyone is doing and bringing efficiency into different processes, is AI a deflationary mechanism? What happens to the world when these systems become more mainstream? So you're nodding away. What do you think of this?
Well, I mean, at least from my vantage point, obviously there's a wide range of industries and kind of perspectives. So I'm sure healthcare, it may be very different. I actually don't know that it's going to be evenly spread, the future. I think while in certain industries it may exert a deflationary pressure in the short run, actually in the long run, if done right, and I'll speak to kind of the industry or where we are focused on, because you touched a couple of times on what we are building, all of us, is in some ways replacing human labor or something. While that's true at one level, in our case, what we are actually trying to do is using these AI tools, just to give you a sense, on marketing, the kind of tools like companies like Adobe build, which are amazing tools like Photoshop and stuff, but there are worldwide less than 50 million people who are trained enough to actually be able to use those advanced tools. And so you have a situation where the reason these hourly rates of these agencies are very high is because it's a supply-demand problem, where they have a manual skill right now that is so constrained, and every company on the planet wants to do more marketing, more content, more storytelling. Maybe as a consumer, the analogy that may work for this group is what happened when we went from one or two linear channels on TV which were highly constrained to now suddenly everyone can consume infinite
So
supply.
basically you're saying market opens up dramatically.
Market opens up, but what it's going to do from a labor and why it's going to be not deflationary in my mind is a whole bunch of new jobs and new skill sets will now find these tools accessible, where you can do things that only 50 million people could do before, now probably 1 billion people can do. And so I think that's going to actually open up massive economic kind of advantages. Now, they may not be spread evenly across all markets and all industries, but in the aggregate, the macroeconomic picture will definitely not be deflationary.
You just reminded me, we are investors in a little company called Canva that's doing exactly that.
They are exactly that.
They're exactly that. Anybody else have a point of view on that?
No, I agree with Abhay. I think I think there are a few things, and he said this earlier too, which is I don't think it's going to be something tomorrow or a year after. This is going to take a while, right? So I think there's a time element that we can't forget. He's right that in some markets it might sound like it's deflationary, but at the end of the day, I think what technologies like this, when they come along, it really democratizes a lot of universe. So now all of a sudden you open that up to so many more people that now you're creating a lot more data scientists and others who can really create what right now it's like a coveted field that only so few people and only from so many colleges can really contribute to.
By the way, this conversation happens every time there's automation, whether it's in the farm, whether it was on the trading floors. I remember some of these people I know in finance talking about the fact that they thought the job of a trader is gone once the stock exchanges became electronic. And there's actually now 50 times more people, maybe 500 times more people involved in that. So I do agree with it. We were told we have 45 minutes, so we have a few minutes left. The clock is actually for an hour. I do want to open it up to one or two questions from the audience if people have, and if not, we can continue to have a conversation. So does anyone in the audience have a question for our panel here? Or did the last panel answer every question? Yes, sir. We can hear you. So, Abhishek, do you want to take that?
Okay, I understood parts of your question. Your bigger picture is health care. Then you mentioned biotech. Indeed. Right. In the field of biotech, there is a lot of effort going on over actually last 20-25 years to take the genome and convert it into a database from which diseases can be better understood, and from there drugs can be better understood, interventions can be better understood. I mean, just this year the Nobel Prize in protein computational prediction of protein structures is a fantastic advancement. But when it comes to actually coming up with a product from there that helps day-to-day clinical practice, it still requires a lot of other AI, actual intelligence. You really have to understand the disease in depth and from there come up with more predictive models. The size of the clinical trials could possibly go down based on what you're saying if more and more modeling could be deployed, and that trend is beginning to happen. More accurate understanding of a given intervention's effect, that's beginning to happen. But I think in the bigger healthcare sector, I would say there's a huge need to be able to eliminate possibly 30% of the overall healthcare budget, which goes into general and administrative. That is a couple of $1 trillion, I would say. That will help the US system quite a bit. So a lot of the AI industry, if it can tackle that problem, empowering the physicians in doing what they really do, instead of the legal system and the guidelines and the processes, that would be tremendous help for the healthcare industry.
And there's a lot of people working on that problem.
Right.
I think maybe you can have that discussion with Sarvajana one-on-one after the panel, because it is quite singular topic driven. Anybody else have any questions for our panelists? Yes, please. So I think it's actually a perfect use case for a lot of the transformer technologies. Does anyone have a point of view on that or know of a company that's doing it? Because I'm pretty sure they are. The question is that there are, when you're doing research or doing something, there's multiple different reports, and it would be nice to have an AI technology that would condense them into one piece of information. And it's a perfect use case for Gen AI. I mean, it's pretty standard. Nothing right. Do you have a question? Notebook is very similar to that. We use it for financial services stuff, but a lot of there are many companies working on solving, including in our portfolio, solving the back office problem of healthcare, solving the front office problem of healthcare, solving the insurance problem of healthcare.
Excellent.
And so, yes, but they're all in their infancies. They're in their tens of millions of dollars and are fighting incumbencies of companies like Epic and those that control the world. And, you have a lot of regulation. So there's other issues in healthcare to be solved, not just technical issues.
Indeed.
I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank our panel for joining us. Thank you for listening. And they'll be here. If anyone wants to grab them and talk to them, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.